Welcome back to Overtime here on WOTM. Because we missed our Who's Better segment last Wednesday, we'll bring it to you here tonight. And Mark, once again, we introduced baseball last week or 2 weeks ago with a great comparison with Chipper Jones being a part of that comparison. Now we have another former great against a guy who played for a very, very long time but retired here recently in Carlos Beltran. So it's Dale Murphy and Carlos Beltran. I love these Who's Great segments because it's kind of like works with the game within the game, and you're comparing two guys which maybe off the top of your head you think one thing, but then the stats might let you know a different storyline that you probably hadn't thought of.
Well, I think two guys that really made their teams better in the decades they played. Beltran, when he was with the Royals starting off, he went to the Astros, led them on a postseason run where he had like a magnificent postseason run. And then he went to the Mets and kind of ended his career with the Cardinals and being like a key postseason player.
Right.
So he was a guy that stood out as one of the best center fielders of his time. Now, Dale Murphy is a guy who's in the Hall of Fame. Beltran is not eligible yet, so that can't really be held against him. But Murphy, back-to-back MVPs, that's rare. Not too many people have done that. There's only like 10 or 11 people that have done that in baseball history. So the fact that Dale Murphy did that really stands out as something positive as far as determining who was the better player overall.
Right.
The other thing you have to think of is the era that they played in. Murphy didn't play in the steroid era. I'm not saying that Beltran did steroids.
Right.
But again, most of the offensive statistics in Beltran's era were a lot different than they were in Dale Murphy. That's the '84 All-Star game. Willie Hernandez for the Tigers in San Francisco. I mean, I still remember watching that game. Anyway, Murphy hitting a home run. But if you look at the overall numbers, because Beltran played more years, more games, his numbers stand out as much better if you were going to take the overall numbers. So you can't really look at overall numbers always because they can be misleading. If a guy plays more years, if he has more bats, more plate appearances, he should have better numbers.
Right.
There are things you can look at to break that down, that even it out, like batting average or slugging percentage or OPS. But I want to look at it a couple different ways because when I saw these numbers, I'm saying Beltran wasn't that much better than Murphy.
Right.
All right. And I watched both of them play. Murphy was a guy who I feared as someone rooting against Atlanta. And Beltran, I got to see play for the Mets. And after a rough first season, really became one of the better players in their history. Most Met fans remember him for striking out with the bases loaded to end Game 7 of the NLCS.
Right.
But that really was one of his low moments. And he was a pretty good postseason player overall. So I won't use that against him. But if you're looking at the straight numbers, almost twice as many stolen bases, over 400 RBIs, more runs scored, 400 more runs scored, more home runs, more hits, almost 500 more hits. So those numbers are a little favorable to Beltran, but you look at the fact that he had about 2,000 more plate appearances than Murphy did.
Right.
So what I decided to do was look at their numbers over a 5-year span. But before we do that, I want to show you the awards, individual awards, because that's another way where you can break that down as far as all-star games, MVPs, and obviously if they're in the Hall of Fame, but Beltran is not eligible. So Murphy has back-to-back MVPs, 82, 83. Beltran never won MVP, so that's a big negative against him. 9 all-star games for Beltran, 7 for Murphy, 3 Golden Gloves for Beltran, 5 for Murphy, both very good fielders. Murphy, remember, he came up as a catcher.
Yeah.
Then they put him out left field, center field, very good. He was a 1 in Stratomatic baseball, which means you're the best fielder in left and right field and center field. So that really worked for Murphy. Both had good arms, both very good outfielders, could get to a lot of balls. So what I decided to do to make it really fair is I took their average season from age 24 to 31.
Right.
You figure these are the prime years of their career. And boy, their numbers really then show the story of how even this is. 282 to 284, Murphy better, higher batting average in those years than Beltran. Hits are almost identical per season. Home runs, only a difference of 4, with Murphy having more. RBIs, Beltran, again, played with a little better players than Murphy did, so maybe he had more RBI opportunities. Beltran and Murphy, both big run scorers. If you can average over 100 runs per game over an 8-year span, that's very good. And Murphy with the higher OPS which you wouldn't think overall.
Exactly.
Looking at those other numbers.
Exactly.
So in breaking this down, who do I think is better? Well, Murphy with the back-to-back MVPs is something you just can't avoid.
Mm-hmm.
However, okay, and this is not going to be popular with the Braves fans, but again, I gave Chipper one, okay, over my favorite player ever, all right? So Beltran, I think, was a bigger threat as an individual player from year to year than Murphy, and he had better stats longer in his career. So while Murphy might have been slightly better in these major years, Beltran continued to put up good numbers. Later in his career, Murphy fell off the table, where once he left Atlanta, went to Philly, and then Colorado, he was no longer the same player, kind of done at age 33, and Beltran played into his late 30s. So I would definitely give the advantage to Beltran. Also, Beltran, one of the better postseason players of his time, a guy with a 307 lifetime batting average in the postseason, 16 homers, 52 RBIs. Murphy only played in 3 postseason games, so I couldn't compare the two of them there.
Exactly.
But I think that stands out for Beltran's favor as well. And that's why, despite the back-to-back MVPs, which to me is very big for Murphy, I think Beltran had the better career, where you could say Murphy had the better average seasons during the prime of their career. I thought Beltran had a more productive, longer career than Murphy did.
I think it's great as far as like being able to kind of split the hairs between the two, because I think if you're giving me just a hypothetical, just, hey, you're going to take these guys for the first 10 years of their career, I think you go Murphy and you probably don't even look back. But however, I think it's a little bit more impressive when you talk about a guy like Barry Bonds, you talk about a guy like Carlos Beltran, who played really well late. Say what you want to about Bonds and the steroids and all that, but there's something to be said putting up ridiculous numbers post 35. And Beltran was still able to do that late in his career. Hank Aaron was the exact same way at Bob Gibson, and there was Satchel Paige and a lot of these guys that put up good numbers.
Great numbers.
Great numbers, past what most people would consider their prime. Beltran was that. I also trust Beltran a little bit more in playoff baseball and high-stakes baseball as well. I played for a lot of different teams, played 20 years overall. I agree with your assessment. I think this kind of is a good snapshot. This little run here, 24 and 31, that's for the most part your prime. Murphy seems to have the edge there, but overall, who's better? Exactly.
Not enough of an edge.
I think Beltran does have the edge there. So once again, another great installment of Who's Better, Murphy and Beltran. You went against the Braves the last time, or you went for the Braves the last time, and you went with the Braves this time. And so for those keeping score at home, like the non-Brave this time, however, Chipper in our last Who's Better segment. Coming up next here on Overtime, NBA playoffs now going to its Final Four, so to speak, with the conference finals now set. We'll talk about it coming up next.